Hey, what is immortals? It is TCCrew here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 10 of What If Quirks Were Outlawed. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So we begin. Midoriya and Stain went to talk in private. It was tense. Even after they had entered the room and made sure that no one else would hear them, it was silent. Like they were waiting for the other to speak.
I'm not going to sit here and waste your time, so I'll get straight to the point.
Midoriya then said, breaking the silence. Stain held a neutral expression as he looked at Midoriya. The green-haired boy was a little nervous. He didn't want to think that Stain was guilty of murder, but his mind needed answers to move on.
During my patrol today, I encountered someone odd. He claimed that I, a vigilante, was responsible for his brother's death. Apparently his brother was some AQTF agent called Ingenium, and he claimed that he had been carved open.
Midoriya said, hiding his nervousness with a calm voice. Stain's eyes went a little wide upon hearing this, but they quickly went back to their regular manner as he said, with a cold voice.
If you're going to ask if I was involved with this, I'll save you the trouble. Yes, I killed him.
Midoriya was horrified to hear this. He didn't want to believe it, but it was true. Stain had killed someone, and it looked like he didn't feel any remorse about it.
Why did you do it?
Midoriya asked, his voice showing that he was horrified. Stain didn't change his expression as he said, with his usual bloody voice.
You ask why I did it. It's because they need to go. How much pain have they caused? How much have they taken? How many more of my comrades need to fall before society realizes how terrible they actually are?
Midoriya shook and was even more horrified now. Stain was right. The AQTF had taken so much from so many people, but that doesn't mean that killing is the right option.
You should understand this,
Stain then said, using the same voice as before.
You have seen and experienced the true colors of the AQTF. You should be the one that agrees with me.
Midoriya lowered his head upon hearing this, and Stain smiled. He knew that the green-haired boy would agree with him, and this action showed that he did. Stain waited for Midoriya's response until he spoke up.
Uraraka,
he said, his voice being calm and silent. Stain was confused upon hearing this, as Midoriya continued, with the same voice as before.
Her family suffered discrimination at the hands of the AQTF. Her parents owned a construction company that was shut down because they all had quirks. They were forced into poverty, and she was forced into the streets where she met Ashido and the others.
Stain was even more confused now, as Midoriya continued to speak.
Both Ojiro and Ashido have obvious quirks. Therefore, they were constantly attacked for it. They too ended up on the street, all because of society. Kushima and Bakugo are far more similar than they ever will admit. They were born with quirks, were discriminated against because of it, and gained an aggressive attitude that further villainized them in the eyes of everyone else. The difference between them would be that Bakugo ended up with the vigilantes, while Kushima ended up as a petty criminal. All five of them are different people, but they have things in common. One, they have all suffered more than I have. Two, they don't agree with you.
The green-haired boy said, his voice sounding as calm as it did before. Stain was even more shocked now. He hadn't stopped to fully listen to everyone's backstory, but Midoriya did. He couldn't fully understand him. Why would he stop and listen to everyone? The green-haired boy looked at Stain, his eyes being angry as he shouted,
They have suffered more. If anyone could agree with you, it's them. But they don't. So why would I? Why should I? Someone who was quirkless until just recently. Someone who didn't know pain until becoming a vigilante. Someone who threw away his chances at a normal and great life for the sake of this cause. Ever agree with you?
With rage in his voice. Stain was thrown back by this, but he finally understood Midoriya. The green-haired boy took the time to listen to everyone because he cared. He genuinely cared. He wanted to change society, knowing fully well that it wouldn't benefit him if he did. He even gave up his quirklessness, knowing full well that there was no turning back afterwards. He was selfless, and he would happily sacrifice himself. He was what Toshinori would have called a hero. The two vigilantes stared each other down until the door flung open.
What is going on here?
The voice of Aizawa asked, wondering what the aggressive shouting has been about. Midoriya looked at Stain in disgust as he said,
Do you want to tell him what you did?
Stain looked away, and Aizawa was confused until Midoriya spoke up.
He murdered an AQTF agent!
Aizawa was shocked to hear this, but he quickly regained his composure as he asked,
Did the agent have any relatives?
with a worried tone. Midoriya didn't change his expression as he answered.
Yes, his little brother came for vengeance during my patrol.
Aizawa was even more worried now. Killing an AQTF agent was not a good idea, especially since they were starting to gain support and recognition. The murder could easily be used against them, and they didn't need that.
Was it on purpose?
Aizawa then asked, hoping there was an accident. His hopes, however, would be instantly crushed as Midoriya answered.
Yes, and he didn't even try to hide it from me.
Aizawa was starting to get angry now as he looked at Stain and said,
You know how easy it is for the AQTF to turn everything against us, and you still kill one of them. Did it ever consider that it would cause us more trouble? That we could get attacked by a vengeful relative just like Midoriya?
With an angry tone, Stain continued to look away and didn't answer any of Aizawa's questions. The tired man was even more annoyed by this, but he shrugged most of it off as he said,
We'll deal with you later. Right now, we need to plan our next move.
With a tone that clearly showed his annoyance, Midoriya nodded in agreement to this as he walked through the door and left Stain. They needed to do something about him, but that could wait. During these times, they all needed to work together. That included Stain. This didn't change how they viewed him now, and they needed to be cautious with his words and actions. He may be a competent and valuable member of the team, but they couldn't bring themselves to trust him right now. Mirio was lost. Not only had he encountered Dekiru, but he had failed to capture him. The vigilante was smarter and more tactical than he thought. He even played him for a fool. He was bothered by that, and what the vigilante had said. But there was something else. Before their fight, Dekiru had encountered someone else. Mirio had later been informed that it was the younger brother of the late Ingenium, but that didn't make what happened any better. When the other officers had swarmed into the scene, they had surrounded Ida and began to beat on him without any remorse. Mirio had even tried to stop them, only to be pushed back and told to stay out of it. He didn't know what to think anymore. He always believed that the AQTF were the good side. But recent events only seemed to amplify the things that Dekiru had told him. Mirio needed answers, and he needed to know if what Dekiru said about Night Eye was true. He needed to know if he was on the right side, or if he had been naive all this time. The blonde made it through the halls with a goal in mind, until he stopped at a certain door. He knocked, and was quickly given the clear to enter. On the other side of the door was Night Eye, sitting at his desk with a pile of papers. The agent looked upwards towards Mirio with a neutral expression, as he asked, with a calm voice, How did your patrol go? Mirio looked down, as he answered,
It didn't go so well.
with a voice that shows some form of shame. Night Eye was curious upon hearing this, as he asked, What makes you say that? Mirio continued to look down, as he scratched the back of his head and said,
We had an encounter with one of the vigilantes. It was Dekiru, and he managed to escape.
with a voice that was similar to the ones he used before. Night Eye's eyes widened upon hearing this as he said, I see. That explains a lot. That vigilante is a force to be reckoned with. So I am not surprised that he managed to defeat you. With a voice that was still calm, Mirio was surprised to hear this. Night Eye had told him about Dekiru before, but he never imagined that he would be so impressed by him. I can tell that something else is going on. What are you thinking about? Night Eye then asked, using his usual calm voice. Mirio had hoped that Night Eye wouldn't notice how distraught he was, but at the same time he wanted to talk about this. Ingenium's brother tried to capture the vigilante, but he was defeated. The other officers began beating him up once they were on the scene, and they did so without remorse, the blonde said, sounding distraught as he said it. Night Eye held a stern expression as he asked, with an equally stern voice, Did he use his quirk in an attempt to capture Dekiru? Mirio looked confused as he answered, Yes. Not knowing what Night Eye was going to say, the agent pushed his glasses back into place as he said, Then it was deserved. Those things can't go unpunished. Mirio was even more distraught now. Night Eye just condoned the act of beating up a teenager for virtually no reason. How could he agree with something like that? How can you say that? He's just 2 years younger than me, and he was related to one of the fellow agents. How is it right to almost kill someone just to prove a point? Night Eye looked at him with cold eyes, ones that Mirio had never seen before, as he said, Because we exist to enforce the law. It's not enforcement if we take it lightly, or we go easy on someone just because they're our friend. Mirio just got angrier upon hearing this, as he said, What about Toshinori Yagi? Wasn't he your friend? With more anger in his voice. Night Eye reacted upon hearing this as he stood up and shouted, Who told you that name? With a hint of anger in his voice. Mirio didn't answer, but Night Eye still knew. He could figure out that Dekiru was responsible for all this, and it only served to annoy him further. Toshinori was an idiot. He believed in a society that had no hope in existing. He refused to see the truth or reason, so I forced him to, the agent then said, showing his annoyance. Mirio just got more frustrated upon hearing this, as he said, "You betrayed your own friend," with a passive-aggressive tone. Night-Eye was unaffected by this, as he said, "I tried to open his eyes, but he insisted on keeping them closed," with the same cold voice as before. Mirio didn't know what to say anymore, for he couldn't even recognize Night-Eye anymore. The man he saw right now was not the one that he knew. "Is that all? Or do you have any more things to say?" Clearly annoyed by their argument, Mirio didn't answer Night-Eye before leaving through the door. The blonde made his way through the corridor with anger, for he couldn't do it any other way right now. TCCrew was right, and the AQTF was wrong. They had no issue with beating people half to death, even their own. And they don't feel bad about it. Night-Eye even betrayed his own friend, and all he can say about it that his friend was an idiot. Mirio had enough. He couldn't stay any longer. He joined the AQTF so that he could help people, not become whatever monster Night-Eye was. If he wanted to help people, he would need to change his ways, and right now there was only one way he could think of doing that. About a month had passed since Midoriya confronted Stain, and they had finally decided to deal with him. The group decided that they couldn't trust him anymore. Therefore, they didn't let him patrol as much. The few times that he patrolled, they refused to leave him on his own, much to his own displeasure. The group were hard at work, and managed to gain more and more supporters with time, but they could tell that bad things were coming. There were rumors about humanoid monsters attacking people in the dark, and that they were more brutal than any AQTF soldier. This made the group be very careful, for they could all tell that getting caught by one of those things might as well be game over. Other things that were happening was an increase in vigilantism. More people took to the streets in an effort to help others, and the group discussed the possibility of recruiting some of them.
"Looks like your plan worked like a charm, TCCrew,"
Aizawa said, typing away at his laptop as he did. Midoriya held his newly healed finger as he answered.
Yeah, it almost worked too well. I'm a little concerned by the amount of people that are out there now.
Aizawa understood Midoriya's concern. The new amount of vigilantes will lead to an increase in strength by the AQTF, and that leads to the less experienced ones being caught. The tired man scrolled through the many articles of vigilantes, looking for interesting individuals until Midoriya spoke up.
Hang on, what's that?
The green-haired vigilante said, as he pointed to the screen. Aizawa zoomed in on what Midoriya saw. A new vigilante with blonde hair and a mask that covered the lower part of his face. The green-haired boy recognized this person. It was the AQTF rookie that he had encountered 1 month ago, Lemillion. Midoriya looked at the image and read some of the text until he said,
"What are you doing?"
Aizawa was confused as he asked.
"Do you know him?"
Midoriya scratched his chin as he answered.
Not really. I encountered him during one of my patrols last month. He was with the AQTF, and I think he was being trained by Night-Eye.
Aizawa was even more confused now as he asked.
"Why would he become a vigilante if he's with the AQTF?"
With a voice that perfectly mirrored how confused he was, Midoriya kept thinking about it until he said,
I don't know, but he seems pretty naive. It was like he thought the AQTF was something that they weren't. So maybe he realized the truth and decided to defect?
Aizawa had little more understanding now, and it made him think of something.
"Or he could be trying to get our attention in an attempt to track us down and capture us,"
The tired man said, his voice being calm. Midoriya understood Aizawa's concern. It was hard to believe that an AQTF agent would defect like that. So it made more sense if he knew that they were looking for people and tried to get their attention. Midoriya, however, felt that this wasn't something that Lemillion would do. He felt that maybe Lemillion realized his mistake and tried to make it right.
"You know him better than I do, even if it isn't a lot, so you decide on what we do with him,"
Aizawa then said, knocking Midoriya out of his thoughts. The green-haired vigilante thought for another second until he decided on what to do about Lemillion. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.